unmuted. Just say hello. There we go.
So how do I now?
Just say hello.
Wait a minute.
They can hear you.
Can you hear me? He can't hear me.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Bye, Steve.
Just so everyone knows, this is Ross from NCTV. We are now live. Just so everyone knows, we are now live and broadcasting.
I'll wait till 3. Melissa's going to be on, but she'll be a little late.
Okay.
You're looking okay there, Roberto.
I look better than I feel.
Yeah. We hope you get better. Get the weekend in there and get rolling.
Thank you. Yeah, no, just for those who don't know, I've been out all week. I spiked 103 on Monday. Aaron was like, "We should go to the hospital," and I was like, "I think I'm gonna wait." So yeah, I've been down. This is my lemon ginger tea. So yeah, I'll probably be pretty quiet for a lot of the meeting because I won't be able to take a lot of it.
Well, we'll
You can hear you.
call the meeting to order. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Thursday, February 18th, 3 p.m., 2021 Board of Health meeting. Remind everybody that the meeting is being recorded by video and audio. And pursuant to the governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, any Nantucket public body that holds a meeting will do so via Zoom video conferencing. The video conference will be shown on Nantucket's Government TV YouTube page. We are now using Zoom webinar for meetings for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise hand button if they wish to speak. Chair will call on those who have raised their hands in order. If you do not have an audio capable device, the Q&A button can be used to type a question. The YouTube chat will no longer be enabled. Any questions that cannot verbally be asked must use the Q&A function. All questions should be directed through the chair. Okay. Before we get started, is there any public comment that anybody needs to talk about before that's not on the agenda? I don't think I see any
There's
hands.
no hands raised.
Yeah. Okay, then we'll start with approval of January 21st, 2020. Is that supposed to be 21? Probably 21 minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I think you need to do a roll call.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. So for attendance purposes, yeah, do a roll call. Malcolm McNabb,
Yes,
Meredith Lepre,
Yes.
Jim Cooper.
Here?
Melissa will be joining us. We also have a few other people here with us today, and I'll just go right around. Art Crowley, Assistant Director. Kathy LaFave, Board of Health Inspector. We also have Greg Corbo from Town Council. Ellen Prives. We also have Ruth Plandowski. We had Ford Hathman. And we also have Dan Malloy from Site Design. A couple other, we have John Hedden on, Paul Santos, and Terry Norton, who's taking our minutes. So, okay, well, then we'll go to the approval of the minutes of January 21st, I think that's supposed to be 2021. So,
Yes.
any corrections, additions? Seeing none, can I get approval for the minutes?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second,
Okay, by roll call vote, Malcolm McNabb,
yes.
Meredith Lepre,
Yes, but does it matter? I wasn't there.
probably. So it's Jim Cooper
Yes.
and Steve Visco says yes. Okay, next, release of the septic loan for 18 Golfview.
So this release of the septic loan is just that it's been completed, and we need to pull it off the deed. So it needs a vote of the Board of Health in order to do so.
Okay, and could I get a motion to release that loan and also for the rest of the board to allow the chair to sign that?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor by roll call, Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
Meredith Lepre,
yes.
Jim Cooper,
Yes.
and Steve Visco says yes. Then now we have a loan for 12 and septic to sewer.
This was the section of the Shimo Pond sewer that was moved forward that we're requiring the connection to sewer. So we need that. We have no objections to the approval.
Okay, I get a motion to approve the loan.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second,
All in favor by roll call vote, Jim Cooper,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
Meredith Lepre,
yes.
and Steve Visco says yes. Another loan for 9 Ridge Lane, repair of a septic.
Same. We have no. It's a septic system that's been in failure, and we have no objection to the repair to the loan.
Can I get a motion to approve the loan?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second,
All in favor by roll call vote, Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
Meredith Lepre,
yes.
Jim Cooper,
Yes.
and Steve Visco says yes. Okay, variance request for 2 7 Mile Lane, bedroom credit for an IA in a wellhead protection zone.
I do not remember which representative is here for them, but I believe
That
there
is Jerry Buzanowski.
There you go. And I know
Jerry-
Jerry received I know Jerry received an invite, but it doesn't seem like he is here.
I mean, I could provide some input if that,
Yes, please, Art.
Yeah, all right, why don't you do that?
so this is a property that's in the Sconset wellhead. And just to remind the board has allowed staff to grant bedroom credits outside of the watersheds and the wellheads. This one being in, the board requires the variance to be granted by you all. So that's why he's here. It is a net benefit. It's a 20,000 square foot lot. And the bedroom credit's going to give them 3, which is a net benefit of, like 1.5 conventional bedrooms on the property as opposed to 2 conventional, which they could put there. So we would recommend approving. The board has not denied a bedroom credit in the wellhead up to this point. So, and it's not a requirement in this zone. If it was a requirement, it would be a different issue.
Yeah, I think we did one of these on the same property not too long ago.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Art? Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor by roll call vote, Meredith Lepre,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
Jim Cooper,
Yes,
and Steve Isco says yes. That gets approved. Okay, now renewed discussion on denied variance for 29 Ridge Lane.
So I'll let Paul Santos take over. Paul, I believe this one's yours, right?
Thank you. Thank you. I hope to be very brief today. Yes. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. Thank you. I hope to be very brief today. So this is a follow-up discussion. We came before the board in December on behalf of AH Construction to seek variance for a septic tank that was placed within 9 feet of a property line where Title V requires 10 feet. The board saw fit to deny that variance and requested that we physically have the tank moved. In follow-up discussions I had after that meeting with DEP and a discussion that I had with Artel to inform him of my discussion with DEP, a alternative to the variance would be for the owner of the property to seek an easement from the abutter, in which this case, this property is in Fisher's Landing. It's abutting actually open space within Fisher's Landing. That an easement to justify the lack of the 1 foot separation between the 9 and 10 was an option that is available to us. Rather than seek that easement and go against kind of what the board had said originally, Artel thought it was best that I come before the board, explain the situation, and then if the board is okay with the easement alternative, that I would then pursue the easement and go that route with regard to the placement of the tank. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And again, I believe Art has followed up with the state also after my discussions with them.
Do you want to add to that, Art?
So I had a conversation with Brian Dudley with DEP, and he does say that this is a viable option. I don't think, I wanted it here because I didn't want it to look like anything nefarious was going on where you denied the variance and then, staff then allows this to go forward. So, but he does say it's legal, but that easement's going to have to, be restricted and will always be sort of their property line when it comes to septic setbacks, and there can't be any interference with that. But Paul will put that together for the registry and get it filed. So it's a viable option.
Go ahead, Jim.
is that easement on another owner's property, or is? Okay, I thought I heard him say it's a piece of land in between. Is it a piece of land in between two people, or is the easement actually on someone else's property?
I'll let Paul answer that.
Yeah, Jim, this piece of property abuts open space, so it abuts Fisher's Landing Association, Inc. So it would be an easement on the open space of Fisher's Landing, which is the abutting property to this parcel of land.
And all that property and that property that's going on is owned by all the people in Fisher's Landing?
It's part of the association, correct.
So do you have to get permission from everyone?
Yeah, well, I don't, it would have to go through the association board, and then I believe there is a final sign off from everyone once that's done. Again, I came to you first because it made no sense for me to at least go to them and then ask. If the ask when I get them is that they will not grant it, then I'm left with no other alternative but to move the tank. So.
Well, shouldn't we find out if they're gonna grant it before we approve this thing or not?
Well, I don't know if you're really not really approving. We're just trying to let you know that I'm seeking that option. I didn't want to get to the other point, then come back to this board and you guys say, no, we denied a variance. We're not going to look favorably on that. I mean, if today is the consensus is that you would look favorably on that, I'll move ahead with gladly come back to the board.
All right, how do you feel about that?
You're talking, so, you know, it makes sense, the process that Paul's going through. He's, you know, get, you know, sort of the head nod here. And then he, you know, his harder job is going to be with Fisher's Landing, I believe, to get this approved through them. So rather than him do all that legwork and cost the applicant even more money, this is one step he can knock out. So, you know, it's a viable option. The DEP says complies, you know, so, and the easement's gonna have to be recognized. There can't be any structures, there can't be any, most of that property is already restricted anyway out there. So, you know, it's not as clean and perfect as I'd like it to be, but if it's compliant, that's what I'm looking for.
Well,
Go ahead, Jim.
looking down the road, because is this a one-time deal? Are we looking at other people maybe down the road to do the same thing?
You know, we could, I think it's going to be difficult to get the easements for these things. I don't think it's going to be an easy, you know, because now it restricts what somebody else can do on their property. The saving grace Paul has is this is to the land that was given up to make the subdivision. You know, it was the open space land that this, I believe this property line borders, correct, Paul?
That's correct.
I mean, I personally don't have any problem with you seeking that option. And if you do get it, I would say it would be fine with me. I just don't, I'm a little wary of the association letting you do it, but it's fine with me if you want to pursue that option.
Okay.
Malcolm, what do you think? Go ahead.
I agree with your assessment. Let them do it and we'll see what happens.
All right, I'll agree to that.
You feel the same way, Meredith?
I just have the same concern that I had initially when we discussed this, of it setting a precedent that other people put in their septic the wrong measurements and they get an easement. I mean, I guess, is it okay because it's open land next to them and not a house? So that is you know more about this than I do, but that's my question.
I would think that would only be the saving grace, because if you are abutting another property owner, there was no way they would let that happen.
Because this restricts their property by putting this easement in there. So it's not to a neighbor's advantage to do this for you. Not to say that it's not going to happen, but.
And every case that comes in front of us is different. So I think that's how we have to look at it. So I think the consensus for you, Paul, is if you want to go that way, Looks like we'll see what happens when you come back to us.
Okay, great. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the time.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
A continuation of variance discussion for 167 Hummock Pond Road.
Yes, this is Dan Malloy for a variance request. Dan? Dan, you're up.
I couldn't hear anything. Was that?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
We
Dan,
can
it's
hear
for
you.
you.
Okay. Dan Malloy here, 167 Hummock Pond Road. So the board last saw this application almost a year ago. When we first brought it before you to get your, essentially to take the board's temperature on whether or not you'd entertain a variance request for the increased bedroom capacity using IA systems. At the time, the board indicated that they'd be willing to review it. Obviously, you didn't vote because you didn't have a complete application, but I think the board expressed that they would be okay to move forward with this application. So now we have before you an application, just as a quick rundown, the property is 167 Hummock Pond Road. You have 167 Raw with the small fish market out front. And to the right of it is all right in the rear of the property is property owned by Jim Powers. And he has the agricultural, I think he has some greenhouses and some different farm animals on the right side, right front corner of the property. So what we're looking for is a variance from section 5602 and 6404B1 to allow a flow greater than 110 gallons per day. So this is an application request I think the board has seen numerous times in the past. And what we're looking to do is put in IA treatment systems, one for a proposed commercial kitchen to go in the 167 Raw building out front, where they'd like to put in a small commercial kitchen instead of, right now they have a food service truck and they rent a kitchen off-site, and they'd like to have a kitchen on-site. So putting in a system to service the commercial kitchen as well as a one-bedroom apartment in that building. And then as part of the application, asking the board to allow the future construction, if Mr. Powers ever decides to expand on his system, an additional flow as well. So what you have is all the calculations and plans and everything that show the property conventionally, without coming to the board, can support 17 bedrooms. With this variance, we're asking to use IA systems on everything to go from 17 bedrooms to 20 bedrooms. That's what the flow equates out to be. We've provided a breakdown as to how we got to those numbers. I reviewed all this stuff with Art. And the way this would work is if the board were willing to approve this, the owners, Jesse Sandoli and Jim Powers, would then place an easement restriction over a large portion of Mr. Powers' property as well as Sandoli's property that would equate to the square footage required to support that flow. So that would in effect put an easement restriction on all this property that said this property can only accommodate a certain septic flow. Any changes to that requires board approval. That gets recorded. And I think that plan, if you saw a plan in your packet, there was an aerial photograph that had a hatched area on it, on the right side of the property. That shows the overall area that we're looking to restrict. That is really the bulk of the project. The heart of the project is really the waiver on the flow rate. The rest of it is fairly straightforward. It's a conventional system with an easement restriction on it.
Do you want to comment, Art?
So the three of us, Dan, myself, and Brian Dudley from DEP, went over this extensively to make sure, our concern, everybody's concern here is that the loading rate is correct for the property. And everything he, has put forward on that plan and the breakdown with the bedroom credit, with the use of IA, keeps that property within the nitrogen load within Hummock Pond. It's not a requirement in Hummock Pond to install an IA, but it is to get a bedroom credit, and the board has granted those in Hummock Pond because it's, again, not a requirement. This land will be deed restricted. It'll meet the letter of the law with Title V. So I'm comfortable with the proposal. It's not the first aggregate plan that has been done here. So, we're good. I think what he's going to do is follow up later with all the restrictions and deed restrictions and copies from the registry before I even issue the permit. I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, our goal is to get the board, if you're comfortable with it, ask the board to vote today, if you choose to do so, to vote to allow Artel to issue the permit in the office. But he cannot issue it until such time as he gets copies of all the recorded restrictions and easements and everything else. So we're ready to get all those documents recorded and done and probably have it into your office next week, just pending the outcome of this meeting.
Meredith? Does anybody have any questions for Dan or Artel?
I'm good.
Steve, I would like to bring up with these food facilities and the innovative alternative septic systems that, as part of granting this variance, maybe I don't know about a restriction, but an add-on of like bi-monthly nitrogen testing and potentially a digital flow meter on the effluent to make sure they're within the gallonage that they're prescribed. Like this one here is 1,100 gallons per day. Now a restaurant, just so you're aware, a restaurant requires 35 gallons per seat. He may not, I don't know that he's got too much seating over there, but it requires a minimum of 1,000 gallons for the septic system, regardless of the size of the facility. So he's having to put in 1,000 gallons for the food facility and then 110 for the one bedroom apartment. So we'd like to see him stay within, well, he's required to stay within that 1,110 gallons. And we'd like, there to be proof that he is. And also the strength of the effluent coming from a facility like that is just make it easier to monitor, if we're provided monthly or bi-monthly information regarding the water usage as well as the strength of the effluent.
So could we, make, I don't know about monthly with seasonality part of an IA is that they really wouldn't be started going until the spring. Maybe something like bi-monthly. And that would be the service provider that provides that, takes that sample, which he has to do twice a year anyways.
If I could add, if the board, if you do want to consider that, I would ask that possibly, I think bi-monthly would make the most sense, but also if the language could read while the kitchen is in operation. So if it's only open for 6 months of the year, the only flow other than that would be from the one bedroom apartment if there's even somebody there.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah, as long as the food license is, yeah, let's give that one some thought because a lot of times people close before their food license expires. But yeah, as long as their doors are open, as long as the food facility's doors is open, whether it's retail or food service, then what would we say, every other month?
Right.
Yeah, and then I'm not going to mention, we've had some issues with prior places in the past exceeding their flow rates by an exorbitant amount. So, I kind of like the idea of having meter, which is easy to do on the, on the inflow. Periodically keep track.
Yeah, to be clear, an effluent meter, not a
Effluent,
water
yes.
use meter,
Not
because,
right.
yeah, okay.
So any other questions? I see Melissa has joined us. Okay, so can I get a motion from the board to accept this plan with the conditions of the bi-monthly testing and an effluent flow meter prior to the leach, so that Dan could move forward with his permit?
Mr. Chairman, wouldn't that be during the months of operation?
Right, yes, during the months of operation, yes.
I'll make such motion then with the months of operation included.
I'll second.
All in favor by roll call vote? Jim Cooper,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes,
Meredith Lepre,
Yeah,
Melissa Murphy,
Yes.
and Steve Visco says yes. Thanks, Dan.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay. Variance request for the Fairway Hotel, 3-bay sink and a coffee area.
Yes, I believe Mr. Sanford is here, or Dylan is here for that.
Yes. Hi, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Go ahead, Dan.
So I work with Blue Flag Construction, and on behalf of the Fairway Hotel, we are requesting that we would not be required to use a 3-bin sink at the front coffee bar of the hotel. To give some further context, during our initial scope, when we worked with the Board of Health, we had a much more extensive food production happening at this area, with sandwiches and a panini press. And after discussing and reviewing with the Board of Health's representatives, inspectors, it was clear that due to the amount of food preparation and work that would be going on at that space, we would need a 3-bin sink to properly sanitize and make sure everything was clean and organized. So we went back to our team and reviewed kind of the full service, the design of the space. It worked to fit in a 3-bin sink. Due to the size of the area of the coffee bar that we will be serving from, fitting a 3-bin sink just did not seem, or is very challenging, and we're concerned that we won't be able to fit one in there. So we reduced our scope of service at that area and moved all food preparation to our full commercial kitchen, which is just 50 feet towards the back of the building, where there's a full commercial 3-bin sink, dishwasher. Everything will be taken care of directly, prepared, packaged, and brought up to the front counter to be given to customers for takeaway right from there. And the only things that will be taking place at the front coffee bar is coffee preparation, drip coffee, lattes, cappuccinos, things like that. And so with those items too, I know there's mention of the steaming dishes and steaming cups, frothing cups for those. The cappuccino machines have hot water and high pressure steam that comes out of them to sanitize the spoons and these mixing frothing cups. So we're confident we'll be able to maintain a clean space within the self-contained coffee machines and steamers. So I guess we're asking for a variance, considering the hardship of, we understand the request to have a 3-bin sink, and we reduced our scope to adjust to make something that would be more feasible for that space, and moved everything that would require food prep into our commercial kitchen.
Thanks. Is John or Kathy going to take this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, John, Health Inspector.
I think it'll help for me to show my screen of the restaurant plan. Bear with me. I've my first time trying to do this. Shoot. Okay, can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody can see that?
Yep.
Okay, so we have this coffee station right up here on the left as you enter the building. Oops, sorry, I'm feeding back here. This is a 140 seat restaurant because they're going to have seating outside as well, 60 seats outside. We have a small kitchen here. If you remember, this used to be the old Center Street Bistro, and this kitchen is staying the same size as that. And we have a full bar over here with 10 seats. So you're straddling a lot of business things here. I mean, you're going to have full coffee station. You're going to have a bar. You're going to have a full service food establishment at night. 140 seats, which could be used for breakfast, lunch, obviously dinner. And as of now, the only one proposed 3-bay sink is over here in the kitchen, way back in the kitchen. This is the only 3-bay sink being proposed. Of course, they're required to have one. They have a dish room down here. Of course, you're required to have the 3-bay, obviously, if the dishwasher goes down. They submitted their menu for takeout, which is quite a bit of takeout to be done at the coffee bar. But these are espresso machines, you know, which need to be broken down, washed, rinsed, and sanitized. You know, it's just a lot more unnecessary equipment to have to go all the way across the dining hall to be washed in this kitchen area and brought back to the coffee station. My opinion is really that this coffee bar really needs to be sufficient, and operate on its own based on how much is really going on with this restaurant. As I said, it's straddling a lot of different types of businesses. You know, there'll be, I'm assuming, coffee at nighttime as well for the dinner service.
John, I can jump in if you don't mind, just clarify the scope of service. So the coffee bar will operate from 7 a.m. to probably about 3 a.m., which at that point it'll shut down. The staff will do all the necessary breakdown cleaning and transport anything that cannot be cleaned directly at the coffee bar back to the primary kitchen. And the restaurant will not open until about 4 or 5 p.m. So we'll have about an hour to 2 hours of, you know, breakdown and setup time between the coffee bar and setup for the restaurant that we will be able to transport food and, or, you know, any leftover dishes or things that need to be taken care of in the kitchen to that area without disrupting or breaking a flow of traffic for guests that would be sitting down at the tables. During the dinner service as well, the coffee bar will not be open. Any type of coffee beverage that needs to be served for following someone's dinner would be taken care of in the kitchen area or at the bar. Just to clarify for everyone.
I mean, with the takeout menus for the breakfast and lunch, there's obviously going to be a lot of prep happening in this kitchen already, which is going to generate, you know, different pots, pans, utensils. And again, this is the only 3-bay sink in the facility. To have a coffee bar way over here on its own, you know, that can't take care of itself, for lack of a better term, is, you know, it should be able to wash, rinse, and sanitize. You're gonna have to break down equipment. Equipment's gonna have to be sanitized, you know, wiped down. You're gonna have counter space that's gonna need to be wiped down with sanitizer. You know, there's a dump sink, you know, for mixing all the espresso drinks and that type of stuff. It's just, I mean, it's a coffee
Question.
shop happening at the front.
John, what is the minimum, what's the minimum size of a 3-bay sink? I'm sure they, you know, the industry has all kinds of different sizes. Is there a minimum standard size?
It's based on the size of your largest, you know, pots and pans. So, you know, your largest piece of pots, pans, equipment that can be broken down needs to be able to fit in the 3-bay sink itself. So that coffee bar would need a 3-bay sink large enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that equipment is very large, and, you know, at most bars, other coffee bars on the island, they have 3-bay sinks, and they're not, I mean, we're not talking a huge 3-bay sink. It's large enough just to break down equipment and, you know, the pitchers and everything that they mix the coffee with to sanitize.
Okay, I think if you could drop the screen, I think everybody's seen it and has a good picture in their head. So.
And just, I guess, to clarify one last time, that all the food prep will be happening in the kitchen, and will be served in the disposable to-go containers. Same with the coffee cups. There's no dine-in service for breakfast or lunch offered here. So in terms of items that are being generated for mass that need cleaning, it'll be very minimal. And items beyond, you know, a stir or a frothing cup should be able to either, one, be handled right at the espresso machine, or small, if that staff could bring them at the end of the shift to the primary kitchen with the full 3-bin sink and dishwasher to sanitize and clean for future use.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Let Meredith go.
Oh, sorry.
So it sounds like they will be prepping for the night while you'll also be making stuff for, like, it just seems like not a very big kitchen for all that is being expected to be done out of it. And I also just, in these current times, have some concerns about food being traveled that far. I know it's in to-go containers, but it just seems like it would be safer for everyone if there was just a 3-bay sink in the coffee shop. I think that there, you know, with all of the allergies that people have, you're going to need a lot of separate things that are going to need to be washed, and maybe just steaming them is not going to necessarily be adequate. But that's, I don't know if there's a minimum size kitchen that needs to be, but that seems like a lot of seats for that size of kitchen, and to add the coffee bar just seems a little too much. That's just my opinion. I don't know what the minimum size kitchens have to be.
Go ahead, Art.
So I've had plenty of experience in food facilities over the last 30 years. And I'll tell you, there's a lot going on that plan, between a bar, the coffee bar, the restaurant. You know, it's a matter of sanitation. It's a matter of outfitting a place properly to, you know, serve the public safely. And so, you know, I think it should be there. On the other side is, we don't restrict their hours. I mean, what meals they can serve and can't serve. Their intent right now is to serve, sounds like, dinner and then do takeout of the kitchen. But they could change tomorrow if they chose. A food license is a food license. So the best thing is to set it up right in the beginning so that you don't have problems going forward. And I mean, the whole idea is to keep people healthy, prevent foodborne illness, and be able to properly clean your facility.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to add, I mean, hopefully for their sake, they're doing a ton of business and at this coffee stand every day, which makes it even more, you know, your focus is that coffee in the morning, that time period. You're going to be doing a lot of coffee, serving a lot of meals that needs to be washed and sanitized right there during that service. You know, you're going to have somebody walking back and forth constantly all shift long to go back to that dishwasher to wash anything. And, you know, it's a long way to travel to have to go wash something when something should just be right there. It's a lot safer.
Melissa?
Thanks so much.
You're mixing with mine or something.
I'm curious, and I'm sorry if this was already covered. Is the coffee bar open to the public, or is it just for your guests?
It'll be open to both the public and the guests.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think I may see where this is going. So if I get a motion from somebody to either deny or approve the variance.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Malcolm.
I move we deny the variance.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor by roll call vote. Jim Cooper,
Yes.
Meredith Lepre,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
and Steve Disco says aye. Thanks, Dylan, for coming on.
Thanks everyone for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, next, continuation of our public hearing, the minimum standards for swimming pool.
So where we left off last time, was that we had a full discussion about where we feel that the pools, whether we to require pool attendants whenever a pool is open or not. We came into the idea before we were to make a vote. I wanted to make sure that we conferred with town council and had town council did not overstep or is not ill-informed in any way. So I do have Greg here, and I know that
I can only hear like every third or fourth word from Roberto.
Yeah, sorry, Roberto. Can you repeat that? That didn't work so well. I was trying really hard. Thank you.
Call-in number, because this was something that somebody said earlier too. In the meantime, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Much better, thank you.
So sorry about that. Where we were left off last time is that we had a discussion about the pool attendants and the possibility of requiring pool attendants at all semi-public and public pools. There was we were thinking about moving for a vote to make a recommendation in either direction, but we did, in order to prevent any sort of accidental overstep by the board, and also in order to make sure that we properly followed all the procedures, we did want to connect with town council first. So Greg Corbo is here from town council. If anybody wants to do any more discussion about this, we can. The hearing is reopened. So Steve, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Greg while we have him on here? Go ahead, Melissa. Oh, no.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So through you to Greg. Greg, one of the things that I've really been struggling with a little bit is this in the paperwork provided by the applicant was the sort of standard Massachusetts laws around these semi-residential pools, and making the recommendation that we keep our policy consistent with the rest of the state. Is that an accurate representation in your opinion? And I know that we can choose whatever policy we think is best suited for our community, so I don't necessarily think we need to be consistent just to be consistent, but is there should we be considering the policy differentiation based on the fact that these are semi-residential versus public pools?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, I haven't done a survey of what other communities are doing in terms of whether or not to require pool attendance at these, semi-private residential pools. But, what I would say is that it is a matter of regulation that is within the discretion of the board. And the board can exercise that discretion in one of two ways. It can either assess each application on a case-by-case basis and decide whether or not an attendant should be required, or it can do so by regulation. And either way, the standard of review is going to be whether the board's decision is reasonably related to the protection of public health in the town of Nantucket. And the state regulations set forth 4 factors that you should consider in making that public health determination. But how you weigh those factors and apply them is something that is within the discretion of the board to decide. And so, I did go through the materials, and, the thing that kind of jumped out at me was that it seemed like there was some confusion as to what the rules are here. Whether it's, only motels are required to have attendants, or whether or not certain other types of facilities are required to. And so I would suggest that the board do something more definitive one way or the other, and either make a decision that we're going to look at these on a case-by-case basis and make a decision, or we're going to do something more formal in the form of a regulation that says exactly what our policy is, so that there's no room for confusion going forward.
Melissa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a follow-up, could we review what those 4 criteria are again, that what we're supposed to use to make the basis of our decision, Greg? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So this is in the regulations of the Department of Public Health, the minimum standards of sanitation for swimming pools. And in 105 CMR section 435.17 subparagraph 4, it says that the board, when determining whether there is a need for the trained person and the minimum training or certification requirements for this person, shall take into account the size and capacity of the pool, the average attendance, the complexity of the disinfection equipment, and the facility's history of compliance with the regulations. And in my opinion, through you, Mr. Chair, that is not necessarily an exhaustive list of factors that the board can consider, but rather those are guidelines to aid the board in exercising its discretion. And again, ultimately, the test is going to be, is your decision rationally related to the protection of public health with reference to those factors? So in other words, could a reasonable person sitting in your position with the information that you have reasonably conclude that a pool is safer with an attendant than without?
Melissa?
Thank you so much. That's very helpful, and not a question, but a comment, if I might. I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I really have gone back and forth on the issue. And I'm sure the minutes were approved while I wasn't here. I did take a little bit of exception with one of the sentences I said, and I can't really remember it, and it doesn't really matter, but I do understand that that our responsibility in public health is to make sure that we're doing implementing the best safety measures possible to secure the health of our community. And so where I was leaning that this was maybe a bit too egregious, and I do think that a lot of our developments are smaller in nature, that there's, really only a few that stand out to me to be larger. I don't think that this policy is inappropriate. And one thing that I went back and forth on, and I just offer to my fellow board members for consideration is, and maybe this is a question for Greg, would it be appropriate to consider a parameter being the number of lots in a development? And, could we say that developments or semi-public spaces with more than, say, 20 lots need to have a private attendant, and leaving some of the smaller ones that really are more residential in nature and smaller, not needing to have the requirement? And I'm not suggesting that's the right thing to do or not, but I'm just offering it as a suggestion.
Meredith?
I think that if we say the smaller ones don't have to have it and larger ones do, we don't know who lives there, when they live there, if they rent it out. I mean, I think that's just, honestly, I am 100% against this, because if one child falls into a pool and dies, and I get that out of every 10 people that die in a pool, only 3 of them are in a public or semi-private pool, but that's 3 people too many, in my opinion. And I really feel strongly that our role is to protect the public health of Nantucket. And if we allow these developments to do whatever they want and say, well, then if you're not going to do this, we'll just put in private pools everywhere. Well, that's not really doing anything good for this town or the island of Nantucket. They're really ruining it. I think that there need to be pool attendants if if these are pools that are going to be used by visitors and people that are living there, people that use this as their second home. There needs to be somebody there. Somebody has to be monitoring the pH and making sure that the chlorine levels are what they're supposed to be, and making sure that people don't have cardiac events in the pool and drown. I mean, I just think that it would be a huge disservice to the island if we approved this.
Jim?
When we're talking about the case we're talking about now, and we're talking about 132 homes, and there's 132 days that those things are open, and if there's 2 people out of each house going in, you're talking about thousands and thousands of people. You're talking about over 30,000 people in those pools, and it's a small price to pay to put somebody in there to watch those people while those pools are open.
Arcel?
So, we believe these residential pool communities operate much like a hotel or motel. And that there's a lot of visits to these pools because of the rental, the nature of the rental business in there. So, I mean, just this afternoon, we took about an hour. We didn't even take an hour, less than an hour. And we did a little investigating through the website where people have to register for short-term rentals. And you got to figure, out of the 5 communities that are listed or being represented, out of the 5, 2 of them are still being built. And we came up with 30% of the homes in these places are on that list for short-term rentals. I suspect it's a whole lot higher. We didn't have a lot of time to to put into it. We just took a cursory look. And I mean, that's the whole basis of this. If they were operating like a neighborhood, and it was a neighborhood, like I'm thinking back in my day, but the rental, the vacation land that we live in, they operate like a hotel motel, and just a quick little check, we found 30% listed as short-term rentals. So just thought I'd throw that out there for you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if I can just, a lot of this
Go
stuff.
ahead.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. We've touched on a lot of these issues before, and I think Greg, the comment you made, I think is what sort of started this whole thing, in that there was no clarity around the enforcement of this regulation. And, it goes back to the 2011 decision where the board decided to exclude residential pools. And then sort of last year, 2019, went on to enforce a requirement that was not, in our interpretation, in place. And so again, a lot of this was simply to have all of these discussions and get around for a clear consensus and decision on this rule. And I think there is while you can see properties listed for rent, undoubtedly there's a tremendous rental market here. There are a number of requirements already in place regarding the requirement to test the pools and the chemical balances of the pools, so that it doesn't really have anything to do with a full-time CPR certified pool attendant. It's a factor that impacts the decision as to whether or not, sort of which way the board goes, as is the use of the pool, the size of the pool, all the other components in a number, as Greg said, that's not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. So I think, again, speaking on behalf of Hawthorne Park and a number of others, and as I said, there are 40 plus letters submitted by all the impacted residents, some of which are in affordable communities, and on this Zoom as well is Ruth Landowski, who's a trustee of Beach Plum. And there's a big administrative component of this which doesn't factor in to the implementation of this and the oversight of it all as well. And that's on, that falls on the board, as well as it falls on the effectively nonprofit trustees and developments. And I think, as from our perspective, as Melissa said, there is a factor that comes into play around, where you really feel like these resources are being best deployed. And given that there has not been an actual incident in any of these pools, I understand the need to ensure that continues. But these are communities that are occupied, ours predominantly by people who do not rent out their homes. Sure, there are renters occasionally across all of these properties, but I think it's very clear in the rules. Everyone is aware of the fact there is a pool, that it is not 100% monitored, certainly not with a lifeguard. And again, we've talked around this issue a number of different times. We are all for safety and have done everything we can in that regard. It's just, the implementation of all of this, just to sort of broadly pass it across all communities that have pools, not taking into account the size or use and number of hours that the pool may or may not be open is something that I think the board needs to consider. And Ruth, having gone through this last year as they were leading up to the season, looking for the certified pool attendant and whatnot, she may have more color to provide than we do.
Ruth, why don't you go ahead? We haven't seen you before. And
I am a resident of Beach Plum. I'm a full-time resident, and I would speak a little bit to the number of people who, we have more than a third of the residents of Beach Plum are full-time residents. So obviously they do not rent their homes. Of the other 2/3, maybe half of them rent their homes at some point, some for a few weeks a year, some for more. But then another third do not rent their homes, even though this might be a second home. I know Brian spoke to the chemical testing the Board of Health requires, and I think our pool water is tested 4 times a day. I'm not positive about the number, but is tested frequently. And obviously, if it didn't test right, our pool would be closed. Something, you know, if there was the water was not safe or clean, the pool would be closed until it was cleaned up. Obviously, that doesn't happen in a private pool. I am concerned that this is going to put up roadblocks to small community pools and will increase the number of strictly private pools where obviously there is more danger in the long run in terms of accidents. We have key access. It's not an easy pool to get into. You have to have a key and then you have to do something else. No child is getting into our pool, which is obviously not the case in private pools. Brian asked that I bring up, we did go through the process of hiring, planning to hire attendants. Obviously, it was multiple attendants, and we had them trained last year. And then the decision was deferred for another year. So those we did not employ those people. We paid to have them trained, and then we obviously had to pay them something because we had basically promised them a job, and then we didn't keep them on. We would be, of course, faced with under this situation, if somebody calls in sick, the pool's closed for the day. But overall, the whole issue is, for me, is that the safety is being, we already have a safer situation than private pools. No one under 16 can be there without an adult. If you have a private pool and the adult goes to throw in a load of wash or cook dinner, there's nobody watching the child. That's not the case in a residential community pool, because you have to be there with your child unless they're 16 years old. So we already have a safer situation than private pools. And we are not going to have, we're not going to have more community pools being built. We're going to continue to see an increase in number of private pools where there are no regulations. Smaller subdivisions than ours are, I mean, we're looking at a big bill, and they're going to be looking at a bigger bill beyond their HOA fees.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Does anybody have anything new to add that we haven't heard? Sarah?
I just have a question. You can hear me, right? Greg was suggesting that if you were going to do this, that you would implement regulations. And I'm wondering, when he says that, does he mean that you'd actually have written regulations that you'd adopt that would go in with the other regulations that the Board of Health has adopted? Because I think that would be important to do, because the way it is now, there's no way, unless somebody knows about this issue, particularly in the past 5 years or so, there was no way to know that this regulation was in effect. It wasn't being enforced. It's not in any local code book. So I would, I guess if that's the way the board is leading, I would urge you to do that. And I don't think you've produced anything for this meeting, but I would hope it would be something that people would be able to see and read and have input on before it was implemented.
Well, I think once it gets implemented, it would be put right up on the Board of Health website. So as far as any more large properties of land that are going to constitute these types of pools, there's not many parcels out there. So does anybody else have any?
Steve, I have one question about that. So that sort of brings it to my question around the threshold. Because if you build 2 houses and you share a pool, like that technically is an HOA. And so does that mean you have to have a lifeguard? Like at some point that threshold becomes critical, just from a,
Well, I would think that whatever the board decides to do, it would be a blanket regulation. That's what I personally would think. But Meredith, Malcolm.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for going back a little bit, but I have a question for Ruth. Through you, how do you have regulations like you can't be under 16, you have to have an adult available. How do you enforce those regulations? I mean, how often does in fact somebody, an individual actually swim in the pool alone?
Actually, we've learned, I've never seen any child in there, in the pool area without an adult. But if I did, I would ask him where his mother was. And the only children that I believe have been in the pool without an adult have been those fence climbers in the middle of the night. But we're a friendly community, and if we see somebody we don't recognize, or if we saw a child in the pool area without an adult, somebody would say something. Where's your mother?
Thank you.
Where's your father? A child isn't going to get into the pool without an adult helping them. They need a key, and they also have to turn an inside lock that a child can't reach.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else to add before we close this?
I have one question. I just wanted to ask before you vote. I believe there were some members who weren't at the last hearing. Have they mullened in, and has that paperwork been filed?
Who was not here?
I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay.
I did listen to the whole thing.
Okay, so now we got to close this public hearing.
Was the Mullen paperwork filed? That was my question. Sorry.
I didn't know that I had to file paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to Greg on that, but my understanding is that you have to sign something and file it ahead.
What is that paperwork? Is it, are you not going to be able to vote? Is that?
Right. In order to, so-called mullen in, not only do you have to watch the entire tape, but there's a statement that you have to sign, and it has to go on file before the beginning of the hearing. I believe I would defer to town council on that.
I was here for the first one. I was here for the first when we opened it up. I was not I was here in December. I was not here in January. I listened to the whole thing, and then.
Greg, did you want
Yeah. So I mean, I do agree that the requirements are that if an individual member of the board is going to miss a particular session of a public hearing, they can continue to participate as long as they file the required certification. I can see if she can do that now. But I guess before we get there, it wasn't entirely clear to me what the board is voting on at this point.
Did you want to say something, Ford?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, first of all, thank you, Greg, because that was kind of what I would like to raise as well. Is I'm a little unclear as to if there's about to be a vote, what that vote is on. And a large part of this discussion has been around just the unclarity of this entire process, and I think that the lack of clarity is still happening right now because I'm not sure what the vote is. But I do appreciate all of the discussion we've had around this, and I know we've gone through each point over and over, so I won't belabor any of that. I will say that Board Member Murphy in the beginning of this discussion did mention the possibility of, looking at a cap of a number of lots or number of homes. That's what very many places that do have these types of restrictions have done. It's not a blanket, all residential semi-public pools. It's because, to Brian's point, at a certain point, if you did have two homes that decided to share a pool, by rule, if this were enforced, they would have to have, these two homes would have to have a certified pool attendant present. So, I would just encourage this board to just maybe think a little bit harder on how far you want to go in terms of the number of lots. If you are, because it seems that this board would like to enforce this. So just maybe a little more clarity around whether it's an entire blanket statement or you cap it. I do think a cap is a pretty reasonable assessment.
Malcolm?
Well, Mr. Chair, it's clear to me we have really nothing proposed for us to vote on. And if we're going to have a regulation, we have to have a draft regulation to debate.
This isn't the regulation hearing.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, we would have to draft the whole.
There's not, I don't know what I would vote on. I think I get the consensus of the board from listening to people is that we would like some kind of regulation, but that hasn't been specifically outlined. And I would suggest that we have a draft regulation presented and a public hearing on it, and we can debate about it, whether it's one house or two houses or 20 houses or whatever. Because I don't know what I'd vote on today.
Yeah, okay. Melissa?
Thank you so much, Steve. I was going to say the exact same thing. Thank you, Malcolm. I think that in the lack of clarity of this whole process, I think that there has been question about whether a regulation that currently exists is applicable to the semi-private pools. Is that correct? So are we? I think if I'm understanding this correctly, the confusion came about because the regulation was actually adopted by the Board of Health, but not enforced. So I don't know if we actually need another regulation or if we are talking about upholding the existing regulation and then possibly amending that. So now I feel confused because I thought that this already existed, just hadn't been enforced properly for a number of years. A new enforcement officer came in, started to enforce it, and that questioned the validity of the regulation and the language as it was written and whether or not that was legal or that the process was legal. So I think there's two questions. Thank you, Roberto. I think there's two questions. One is, are we voting to uphold the existing regulation, or two, was that null and void and now we need to look at a new one?
Roberto?
So I think what's happening is that we never actually passed this as a regulation. We never held a public hearing for a regulation. We never held anything. We never wrote any regulations on the chapter. So what ended up, sorry. So what ended up happening is that we did the vote. There was a 2011 vote when Richard Ray was the director that apparently exempted the residential pools. But then also there is a 2015 vote that when we did that vote, we did it as a vote just to enforce a specific section of 105 CMR 435, which is the state regulation. And we voted it in as a policy. And now the issue of how it was enforced and all that came up, and whether it was we did that properly came into all that situation. So now where we are now is if we were to be voting, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong here, would be to either uphold the 2011 vote as a policy or the 2015 vote as a policy while we create a regulation and then create a whole new hearing for a regulation.
So just for clarification, we could at this moment affirm the votes of prior boards from 11 and 15, and at the same time ask your office to review that regulation and look and see if that policy is still up to date, or the regulation is correct.
I would say either 11 or 15 because they're contradictory to each other.
They're contradictory. Thank you.
Brian?
So unless I would default to Ford or Sarah, as I am clearly not an attorney, but my question stands around the entire sort of 2015 regulation, which that whole policy meeting was based on an easing of existing restrictions, which excluded the semi-public residential pools, like specifically in the 2011 actual ruling that was made. So to have a meeting in 2015 which addresses the policy, I mean, we've talked through this a bunch of times, so I apologize, but with Greg on, I just want to be sure that I'm being clear that meeting in 2015 started with the entire premise and discussion around the current requirement is we are requiring lifeguards, which is not true at that point in time. So the entire discussion was based on that. Meanwhile, in fact, residential semi-public pools were excluded from that regulation. So I don't see how a 2015 restriction easement can become more burdensome to a group of owners and who the semi-public residential pools who did not have, it actually wasn't even like they were omitted from, they were specifically excluded from that regulation. So that 2015 ruling, I still fail to understand how that can apply to residential semi-public pools when they were not given a chance to actually even be present at the meeting.
Well, that we'll take little exception to. They were always given a chance to be present at the meeting. It was publicly posted.
Correct.
We have all the proof of postings.
Correct.
And it was an open meeting.
Right. And it was continued from one meeting to another. And the entire discussion was around easing the burden. So even if you listen to that first meeting, again, that's just my question, because I still think even if you say we enforced the 2015 decision, that's still very vague.
Understood. But do not say that we did not allow for public comment from the people, because we did. It was a public hearing, and it was publicly announced, and it was publicly posted, and it was held in an open building.
Greg?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So, I am at a bit of a disadvantage here because I was not involved in this in 2011, 2015, or even this year before today. But, based on the information that I have what looks like a transcript of an audio recording of a meeting. It's not even the official minutes. But in 2011, on December 8th, it states that Richard Ray states, in essence, I am asking the board to approve mandated lifeguards for all pools associated with hotels and motels and not for housing developments and condominium units. And then later on, it states motion to approve recommendation voted unanimously. So it sounds like in 2011, the board's requirement was that pools associated with hotels and motels had to have lifeguards, but housing developments and condominiums did not. Then I have an audio recording from November 19th of 2015, in which there's discussion of a letter dated 11/19/15 from hotel managers, chart of Massachusetts towns requiring lifeguards at public and semi-public pools. And there's various discussions listed here. And then at the end, it just says, motion to require a permanent attendant at the pool with proper certification at all times, carries 4-0. I honestly, based on this record, and maybe there are minutes somewhere that I haven't seen, but it's not entirely clear what the pool is. And, you know, I just, as town council, you know, I have to say, I don't have a stake in the outcome as to whether or not the board does something here. But my concern is that the record really is not abundantly clear as to what the rules are. And that is a paramount, you know, consideration in rulemaking, is that everybody have a clear understanding of what their obligations and rights are. And so, as I said at the beginning, you know, there really is, I think, one of two ways that you can go about this. You can either enact a regulation that clearly sets forth this category of pool is going to require a lifeguard. This category is going to require a certified attendant. This category is just going to require signage and, you know, locks and other safety mechanisms and monitoring. The other way that you can go is to do this on a case-by-case basis. And as you send out applications, on your application form, you can have a spot that says, do you have a lifeguard? If they check yes, fine, they have a lifeguard. If they check no, then they would get put into another pile, and the board can examine their application and make a decision as to whether or not they should have a lifeguard or an attendant, or if their safety measures are sufficient. But it's just my recommendation, based on the record as I've seen it, is that you don't seem to have something in place that would mandate lifeguards or attendants on an across the board type basis. And to Roberto, if there are other records out there, you know, I'd obviously be happy to review those records and amend any opinion that I'm giving, because I am only giving it on a limited record.
Can I just mention for Greg's benefit that the other part of the issue, Greg, and this is why we met with Roberto and asked to have a public hearing, is that even the minutes themselves, some of the minutes weren't approved until May of 2020. So for people who were attempting to go forward and educate themselves and know what the rules were, there really was no good way of being able to do that. So I think you're absolutely right. Either do it on a case-by-case basis or put some regulations in place now that people can actually hold in their hands and read and understand what applies to them and what doesn't.
Melissa?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Attorney Corbo. Greg, is there any risk that if we go through this process and make new regulations, that existing developments could argue that they are somehow excluded from that regulation because of the confusion in the policies made in 2011, 2015, and that the regulation would only be for developments going forward?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Well, anyone can argue anything. But, you know, in my opinion, with respect to Board of Health regulations, there is no automatic grandfathering like there is in a zoning regulation. And so unless the Board of Health were to say, so-and-so existing developments are exempt, then the regulation applies going forward.
Thank you very much.
Can I get the board's feel on what they would want to do as far as, you know, maybe having another public hearing to set regulations and prioritize the difference between categories of pools? Malcolm?
Well, obviously, there's nothing for us to vote on today. I feel very uncomfortable voting on continuing policy, whatever. I recommend that staff put together a draft regulation, and we can, as a format of something to debate, we could say, and we could decide whether it's all pools, not pools, number of houses, whatever. There's nothing we can do right now. I need to see something in writing that's clear and something I can debate, discuss, and amend as necessary. Vote it yes or no.
Roberta?
Stands. I'm sorry, my voice gave out. So as it stands, we would either continue to, I'm sorry, I think I'm done. I think Ford has his hands up though. Ford.
Thank you, Roberta. First of all, Attorney Corbo, thank you for going through those minutes. I went through those minutes as well and kind of came to the same conclusion. And I know Roberto just stepped away, but I hope he can hear me, because I did want to just clarify a little bit of what Brian was saying. When he mentioned that the residents did not have an opportunity to go in front of the board and discuss this issue in 2015. I think what was meant was certainly not that the vote was taken out of order or done in any nefarious way. Simply meant the 2015 discussion was specific to hotels and motels, so residents maybe didn't know that they would need to be there. So I do want to clarify, Roberto, there's certainly no accusation of anything nefarious in that way. So with that, I would like to say I do think having something actually written to discuss and look at and debate would be very much appreciated, because, you know, of course we would love to see this not enforced against residential semi-public pools, but really one of the requests has just been some clarity around what the rule is. So I could just say we would greatly appreciate if something could be maybe drafted and discussed before any vote may be taken. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could make a suggestion, because timing is an issue here. You know, my understanding is that these applications start coming in March. And, you know, obviously operators need to have some decisions made so that they can make their plans for the coming season. And, you know, enacting a specific regulation takes time. So, you know, what I would suggest is that for this coming season, that staff put together its recommendations in the form of guidelines, and that the board do consider the applications on a case-by-case basis, because I don't want to, at least I wouldn't recommend that you give the impression that because you're not doing anything here today, that entities that had lifeguards or attendants in the past might be getting a free pass this year and don't have to do anything. And so my suggestion would be, as I said before, to have staff come up with a, you know, guidance that can be used this year, that will be turned into regulations next year, but that you can use that guidance as you look at each application. And as I said before, for entities that check off yes, that they're going to have a lifeguard or an attendant, well, then that's fine. Those get put in their own category, and you don't have to look at those any more than you have in the past. But if there are entities that check off, no, we're not going to, then you can look at those individual applications and you can say, okay, you're a under the guidelines, you are a hotel or motel. All the other hotels and motels have lifeguards. You've got to have one. Under the guidelines, you are a some other type of private pool at a campground. You should have an attendant. You fall into this category in which you're a resident. For this year, we're going to allow you to go on the way that you have been. It's just, it would create some mechanism for you to deal with this year now, and then focus on formally adopting the regulations going forward for next year. And I don't want to speak for Roberto, but we did talk about this yesterday, and I believe that he was on board with that.
Yes, I'm on board.
Melissa?
Thank you, Steve. So is the appropriate thing, do we close this public hearing? This is a public hearing. Do we close this public hearing and give board consensus to move forward with recommendations as described by Attorney Carbo? And is that the next appropriate step?
I think so, he was saying.
Okay.
No, yes, yeah.
And I can't remember,
think
do you
so,
need
but
a motion to close the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so I would make a motion to close the public hearing.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor by roll call vote, Jim Cooper,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
Meredith Lepre,
Yes.
and Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
and Steve Visco says aye. Okay, so we'll move forward with that.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
do you need a motion, Steve, for the board to direct staff, or is consensus with those recommendations, or is just the consensus sufficient?
We make it official and make it a motion.
I'm kind of feeling like with this one, we should probably cross T's and dot I's. So I would make a motion to request staff to draft guidelines for the 2022 pool applications, and I'm sorry, 2021, did I say that right? Okay, and then draft subsequent regulations for this board to review for future applications. And if I didn't say that correctly, I'm sorry.
That's good. I guess second.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor by roll call vote, Jim Cooper,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Aye.
Meredith Lepre,
Yes.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
and Steve Visco says aye. Okay, I guess that's it on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
coming.
much, everyone, for your
Thank you
time.
very much.
Okay, we got next on the agenda, Board of Health Emergency Order 11, extend outdoor dining, and BOH Emergency Order 13, gathering limits.
I've asked Artel to take over.
So, oh, you taking it, Roberto, or not?
I've asked Art to take it over.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
It's going to be a group effort here. So obviously, Order 11, we're going to extend, we'd like the board to extend Order 11 to December 31st. It's outdoor dining, December 31st, 2021. That would be the first order. The second order, which is Order 13. We need to remove paragraph 5 and put in the governor's order, which is the requirement of indoor 10 max attendees and outside 25 max attendees. So those are the two orders. Those are the two changes. Does that make any sense? I mean, is anybody all set with that or got questions? It's all, Roberto, that's restaurant 13.
Yes. So the intent with extending order number 11 is to extend it to, there we go, is to extend it to December so that we can continue with the outdoor dining. It's what we're doing in congruence with the select board. And then removing paragraph 5 from order 13 removes the gathering order, which right now we are stricter than the governor by only 15 people for the outdoor gatherings. The governor has us at 10 indoors, 25 outdoors. Our local order has us 10 indoors, 10 outdoors. So this would just remove that section so that it would be 10 indoors, 25 outdoors, mirroring the governor.
Melissa?
Thank you so much. Do you need a motion to accept those modifications or those? Yeah.
We do need a motion and they need to be separate.
Okay. So it was emergency order 11
Yes.
for outdoor dining
For outdoor dining.
and 15 for the gathering limit.
Order number 13 for the gathering.
Sorry
limit,
about that.
and
Okay.
we're removing paragraph 5.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion for emergency order 11 to extend outdoor dining to December 21st. I'm sorry, December 31st, 2021 per staff recommendations.
I'll second.
All in favor by roll call vote, Jim Cooper,
Yes.
Meredith Lepre,
Yeah.
Melissa Murphy,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
and Steve Visco says yes.
While I'm on a roll, I'll make another motion to amend emergency order 13 to remove paragraph 5. Is that right, Roberto? Okay, thank you. And I think I'll just stop at that per staff's recommendation.
Get a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor by roll call vote, Jim Cooper,
Yes.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Meredith Lepre,
Yeah.
and Steve Visco says yes. Thank you. COVID-19 update. I don't know if you're up for it. We need a substitute.
No, I think we'll be good. I did an immediate release for NCTV, so it'll come out today. But phase 2, step 2, the tier 2, opened up today. If you have signed up through the town sign-up sheets, you will be getting an email from Nantucket Cottage Hospital to allow you to sign up for the doses. There's a lot of news out there asking people to go to the mass vaccination sites at Gillette and all these other groups. We don't have to. Our state site here at the VFW is exempt from those orders. So ours will continue going. The clinics will resume on Monday, and scheduling will start tomorrow. Pending vaccine allotment, we should be through that as soon as we can. With that, the 2 vaccines that we are giving, Moderna and Pfizer, are working on do attenuate the 2 variants that we are treating right now, that we are watching. The South African variant has been found in Massachusetts as of last week. So we all have to assume that it is here. And we have to keep with social distancing. That's why we only removed paragraph 5 from the emergency order instead of the whole emergency order. Because we all still have to maintain vigilance. But Nantucket's doing very well. And having been at the COVID center on Monday to get swabbed, thank God I was negative. On Tuesday, we know that the lines are a little bit down, and the numbers are down, so we're doing very well. We just need to continue doing.
Meredith?
Are we checking for the variant here? Do I know? I mean, maybe that's a Gary question. I don't know, but I would think that we would be at this point, but I don't know.
So I know the Broad Institute has the ability to check for the variant, but I don't believe they are for in the stop the spread testing. I think what they're doing is just checking for presence. Trying to say, if you have it, you have it, whether it's the variant or not. We are waiting to hear back from BioBot to see if they can check for it in the sewer. So once I hear back from them, I'll be able to give you an update on that.
Melissa?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to add that while I'm very grateful to see our numbers coming down, I think that it's always a good opportunity to remind our community to maintain vigilance. I think you did that, Roberto, but sometimes your voice was coming in and out. So I'm just going to back your play here a little bit. And also remind our community that the importance of masking while we get everybody vaccinated is critical. This is not the time to let up on any of our mitigation efforts. And everything we do now ensures our best chance at keeping kids in school where they are now, God willing, maybe even more, in-person learning, and certainly gives our businesses the best chance of success as we head into our busier season. So I just want to take this opportunity to remind our community to stay safe and vigilant and follow the mitigation efforts. This is good news, but we're not out of the woods.
Agreed.
Thanks. Anybody else have any other concerns? Seeing none. I think we're good to recess. Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I get a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor by roll call vote, Jim Cooper,
Aye.
Meredith Lepery,
Yes.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Malcolm McNabb,
Yes, aye.
and Steve Visco says yes. Thanks, everybody. Roberto needs to go rest.
I can't believe my throat gave out.
Orange juice.
Yes.
Yeah, orange
Thank
juice,
you.
yes.
Lots of vitamin C.
Yes. Thank you.
Night all. Take care, Roberto.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye. I just let NCTV know that the board health meeting is over. Thank you, Steve.